And all right, here for another episode with the one and only Josh. Josh, mate, I am so happy to have you here. How's everything going?
Yeah, really good. Thanks. It's been a really busy period for me at work at the moment, and I've got a holiday coming up actually at the end of this year, which I'm really looking forward to. So I'm just sort of hanging on at the moment while I can, just to get myself through, basically.
Where are you going for holiday, by the way?
I'm going to Europe for 3.5 weeks, which I'm really looking forward to. But until then, I am head down into work and into just getting through the rest of this year, basically.
Fantastic, Josh. And once again, it's really great to have you here and answer some very important questions that we get from students who are interested in the career path of an engineer. But before we jump into the questions, first thing I want to ask you that I'm really interested to know from you is, why engineering? Why did you go down this pathway? What was the first reason for you to consider engineering when you found out about it in school?
Yeah, it's a good question, and if I'm being 100% honest, I was a student who did maths and science at school, and naturally it made a lot of sense for me to just sort of pursue something that I guess, talked to that skill set. And yeah, for me, I was like, well, all right, let's have a crack at engineering, and that's pretty much the pathway I took. But I was actually thinking about becoming a pilot at the time too, when I was in that phase of life where I was trying to figure out what do I do after school. So it was actually I weighed up the two options, and for me, I thought, well, pilot seems like a really risky, I guess, career to take. It's quite a costly avenue, if you do it yourself. But I was like, oh, look, why don't I pursue a career that's, I guess, a bit more of a safer pathway, if you like, I thought at the time. And yeah, and that was sort of how I got there. Like, I had an interest for the math and science side of stuff. It seemed like this, I guess, open-ended opportunity, if you like, and it certainly played out to be very much like that.
Yeah. And that's great to know, and it's worked out well. Funnily enough, that's a very common story. We hear among many engineers, right? You're interested in, maths and science, you might be studying that at school, and then engineering seems like the next, likely decision that you would go ahead in terms of pursuing a career. So this is not very uncommon, by the way, Josh, but interesting to know you weighed it up with being a pilot and ended up going with, in that time, what would you say, a safe option? Right?
Totally. Yeah. Okay. Definitely. Yeah.
No, I appreciate the honesty. I like it.
Yeah.
Josh, jumping into our questions.
Sure.
Asked by students. First question that I have for you is, how did you decide what field of engineering you wanted to pursue?
Yeah, sure. Look, for me, I would say I'm more of a personable person. I like to sort of work with people more, and I definitely do that now in my career. I kind of weighed up the options and the sort of different types of engineering there were. So I'm a civil structural engineer, like that's my qualification. And to me, that sort of seemed to be the most, if you like, broad in the sense of opportunity that it created from a career path. Well, that was certainly my perception at the time. And I was weighing up between that and mechanical. To me, I just thought, mechanical seems very much more design orientated, like very mathematical. Even though I said I was good at maths and science, like it wasn't actually something that I did want to continue to do for the rest of my career, sort of thing. I did want to sort of go down that project management style route, and the civil engineering just seemed to be more aligned to that from the research I was doing at the time. And I also had like a bit of a real interest in buildings and things like housing, bridges, just like really cool architecture and stuff like that. And it just naturally sort of seemed like the right fit.
Yeah. But the main reason being the fact that civil engineering at the time, what you believed was quite broad, could give you a number of different opportunities. And is that true? Looking back now, being a civil engineer, do you feel like that has given you the broad framework of looking at a number of different jobs?
Yeah, I would say definitely. But at the same time, if I look back at it now, I think it can be somewhat irrelevant, the engineering you actually do at uni, depending on the actual sort of, I guess, pathway you take and pursue and the experience you start to build in your career. You might have a similar opinion to this, but I think it really depends a lot on probably the style of work you get into.
Definitely. No, and that's probably a bit, once again, good to know that, to some capacity, it doesn't really matter what engineering you're doing. And obviously some are specialised fields to get into specific industries,
Definitely.
But it does really depend on the nature of the work that you do once you finish university or you finish your higher education studies to work as an engineer, right?
Yeah.
But you'll only know once you're there. So
exactly, yeah. And look, like it's definitely not talking to that sort of industry or what you go into and the work you start to take on. I guess we're really talking to either you kind of go down a more specialised consulting route where you are doing a lot of design, or you're going down the route of a project management avenue. It probably doesn't necessarily matter as much, the engineering you did, but down the design route, like you said, definitely it's pretty important to obviously be doing the engineering that you studied for at university if you're doing that, for sure.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Next question that we have for you, Josh, is how did you know engineering was the right fit for you?
I think I alluded to it before, but I didn't really. I actually didn't. I wasn't sure. I knew like I said, had the skill set to try it, and I wanted to. And I think, to be honest, I'm still in my career now, and I'm not sure if it's right for me. but no, I don't mean to put people off by saying that. No. But I mean in the sense that you don't really know until you try. And for me, I started at university, and I thought, oh, look, this is a challenge here, and maybe I just like a challenge and like to work hard and have the work ethic for it. I'm not too sure. I think everyone's circumstance is very individual and unique. Like for me personally, because I was in a torn place when I was trying to choose the career avenue I was taking, I was a little bit unsure as to, is engineering going to be right for me? Is it not? Like, how will I know? I think like anything, regardless of whether it's engineering or any other sort of career you're weighing up, you don't know until you try.
Absolutely. But how did you deal with that then? Engineering is a long degree, right? Yeah. It's many years, a lot of technical work, a lot of hard work, and some of the questions that are coming up later. And I want to get your perspective, but how did you deal with that? Still being unsure, a lot of people decide to pivot and do something else. Why did you stick with it?
I don't want to say stubbornness.
But stubbornness.
Yeah, so no, I don't. I wouldn't say that. No, I think, look, I was under, and this came probably from having some work experience that I immersed myself in, but I could kind of see that university didn't seem to necessarily reflect the real world, if you like, as much as it probably is, like, in the day-to-day actual work. Yeah. So I thought to myself, look, 4 or 5 years, depending on where you're studying, is a long time to wait to figure out whether you like it or not. And I was fully conscious of this, but I thought I owe it to myself to at least stick it out and try. And the worst case scenario was that, well, I've got a degree under my belt. Hopefully some of these skills or this degree is transferable into other fields that, are somewhat similar in the industry. And how did I do it? Look, I guess through hard work and determination, honestly, as cliche as that sounds. You have a choice. Do you go back to the drawing board and pivot from there? Am I willing to pivot? Do I want to? For me, I was concerned about wasting time. And looking back at it now, there is no rush. There is absolutely no rush. And I think patience is certainly a massive factor there. And I understood that, like, while this is a very hard degree that I was studying at the time, I think if I stick it out, I'll actually get exposed more so to what it's really going to be like. And I'm glad I did. I certainly have. I've built a lot of great experience. I did a lot of work experience while I was at uni, and that definitely played a massive factor, I think, in actually helping me understand more so why engineering. And I started to get a bit of a hunger for it too, and I actually really enjoy what I was doing. So, yeah.
I love it, Josh. And it's very valuable insights, I think, for many people listening out there about your story and how, you don't have a very conventional path of, hey, I wanted to be an engineer. This was a challenge and you kind of stuck it out and you were determined to actually finish it through. Just having that self-awareness, I think you've had throughout your degree to know that, hey, you know what, there is opportunities in here and also maybe outside as well that I can also look at. Good to have a degree under the belt.
Sure. And I'm not saying that like that's how you need to do it. Like, you could start and think, I actually don't like the degree itself. I don't like university, or I don't like this particular style of engineering, and pivot from there completely change. It's totally okay too. I guess for me, an element of it is I don't actually know what else to do, and I probably might be more self-aware of it now, but at the time I thought, well, I probably wasn't as self-aware as I should have been, and maybe really asked the question, is this what I want to do?
Fair enough.
But yeah, look, like I said, I'm glad I stuck it through, and I'm glad I am where I am now, so it's great.
And it's worked out. No, great to hear, Josh. Next question asked by students when it comes to a career path of an engineer is, did you have a backup plan?
So for me, it was like, I'll try the engineering, stick it out, and if I don't like it, well, try the pilot route maybe, and if not, then in the end, the short answer is probably not outside of that, and I think that's totally okay. It's so difficult to know what you want to do when you finish school, even while you're at school or even while you're at uni, even now. People change their careers all the time. It comes from really that self-reflection and spending that time, I think, to really analyse what is appealing about this career for me.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. That's fair enough. I think, yes, you've already touched upon this point pretty clearly, but we get this question a lot. Did you have a backup plan? Because there is this feeling that sometimes, what if it's not working out? But you being clear that, even if I do this, I have potential transferable skills to do anything else that I can probably put my mind to,
Definitely.
is probably a healthy way of looking at it.
And I think given the audience of this interview and this session, I would certainly stress the point that you don't have to have a backup plan, and don't feel this perceived pressure that you have to know what you want to do when you finish school or while you're still studying, even when you're at uni or even after you've finished uni. It's totally okay not to know that 100%. But I will stress that the fact that you certainly need to have some patience with the process too, and trust the journey that you're on, and just try. Sometimes decision fatigue can come into it, and you can actually end up making no decision at all because you're so concerned about making the right decision. And the reality is there's never going to be 100% correct decision, and the only way you'll know is by doing and taking the action.
Totally agree, and very valuable insights there, Josh. Next question that we have for you is studying engineering in university hard?
Yes. Yeah.
Next question.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. There is no easy way to. I'm sorry for anyone who wants it to be easy. Look, university in itself, I think, is as easy or hard as you want to make it for yourself, and engineering in particular requires a lot more dedication, I would say, than some other degrees. I won't name those degrees, but it is, because you have a massive workload and just in your units and your contact hours, and there's a lot of assignments, there's a lot of exam study and all that sort of stuff. And for me, I was certainly fixated on this point, or this idea that, I have to get a really good result if I want to get a good job. And look, there's an element of truth to that. I was under the impression I was graduating in a time where it was difficult to get a job as an engineer. So I was like, well, if I want to stand out from the rest, I have to do well here. And obviously, if you want to do well, you have to put in the work. And I wasn't necessarily the most brightest person. Would certainly have to work harder to understand stuff. I guess that came with hours.
What was those hours looking like? What was that working kind of study week look like for yourself?
Yeah, so I studied at Curtin, and basically the degree there is 4 years. The first year is, I would say, generalised, and I would say that the contact hours then, I was in 5 days a week, and that partly was just due to a spread timetable, if you like, too. But either side of your classes, you were certainly there doing studying or assignments. So I would say it was probably like a 9 to 5 job at the start, and give or take, you'd maybe have a day off here or there during the week, or half a day throughout the week. Yeah, so that sort of thing. And majority of the day looked like classes, some practical classes, things like that. And then as you progress, obviously, you start to specialise. So after that, it was year 2, you choose the units that are more specialised. So for me, that was civil structural engineering, and you progress from there, and it obviously gets a bit more difficult. The workload, so if this is talking to a full-time unit workload. So I was doing 4 units a semester, and the hours were probably 9 to 5 sort of hours, I would say, but 5 days a week. And then weekends you'd probably be doing assignments too. That starts to creep into year 2, and look, from the 3rd year onwards, it's when it really starts to get quite busy. And I think the reason it gets busy is because you're also juggling a lot of your other life requirements. Basically, you got to fund your lifestyle, and you got to have a part-time job, and juggling that with also trying to get some experience, do some work experience. Like, it's a full-time gig. You start to really get some big hours. And I would say towards the end of my third year, and then probably my 4th year, and I don't want to throw people off here, but for context, I was trying to get really high marks. So I was probably getting to university at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then leaving at 10 o'clock at night for probably the whole year in 4th year.
Wow.
And that was partly because I had 5 units, a thesis, trying to do a part-time job when I could too. And that was probably Monday to Saturday, I would say.
Monday to Saturday.
And don't get me wrong, it sounds grim, but it's actually, when you have some friends at university, like you're all doing it together, it's quite a cool community. Like everyone's in the same boat, and it's really enjoyable. And I'm sure you had a pretty similar experience there.
Definitely, Josh. And that's the reality of it. That's the utter reality of studying engineering. You require those kind of hours. Whether you're trying to achieve high marks, whether you just want to do better, obviously, in terms of understanding the content, it's demanding of you to actually put in that time and really understand the concepts, because they're very technical. I mean, there's so many technical aspects to it. So not a grim story, but the reality of the situation.
Exactly, yeah. Like I said, I don't want to scare anyone off that. But you know what? I think regardless if it was engineering or not, if you wanted to really excel yourself, and this is probably the same for other disciplines in engineering too, it's certainly the same. You get, the result is the work you put in, and that doesn't change, I think, regardless of the degree. And like, there was definitely guys there, I should say, and girls that were probably not as committed to the cause, if you like, and they still went through and passed, and they probably had more of a social life than I did as a result, and that's totally okay too. I certainly wanted to make sure I gave myself an opportunity to get a good job when I graduated and at least have the marks there for that.
I really like those insights from yourself there, Josh. Moving on to our next question that we have for you is, how did you find a job once you graduated? And if you could break down really the process for you.
Sure. Going back to what I was talking about with me thinking it was going to be quite difficult to find work in the market and the industry that I was graduating into, I actually started out as a labourer for a building company, basically. And I was doing that part-time all throughout uni. And it kind of just gave me that experience and exposure, all that sort of stuff. I definitely think that was probably a key starting point to my employment journey as I graduated. So it started with that, and I think that led to actually showing my future employer at the time that, I was willing to roll the sleeves up and actually get dirty and understand and put myself out there to immerse myself in the industry, not in an engineering capacity, but obviously on the tools capacity, if you like.
Huge.
And so look, part of your requirements at Curtin was you have to do, I think it was 480 hours, so that'd be about 12 weeks of undergraduate work or work experience, if you like. So they didn't actually organise that for you. So that was something that you had to go out and seek yourself. And I was conscious of that too. So probably year 2, I think I started and this was through a networking opportunity, I started working at a design consultancy in the city, basically doing some little structural design packages for a mine site. I was working in the city, and it was for this mine that was getting built in Panama, I think it was. To be honest, that was my first taste of what I was like, this is what engineering is like. Geez, do I like this? Like, just 2 years, I'm like, oh man, like I just come to work every day, just punch out calcs and designs, and then like I go back to far out. Like, is this what I actually want to do? But that led to my CV started to build from there, if you like. And I would certainly recommend this to anyone who's studying or either at university to try and immerse themselves in the industry where they can. I then actually through that found another opportunity. I applied for an opportunity I saw.
Just applied online?
Applied online through, I think it was actually advertised at Curtin. They were looking for an undergraduate style student to help out, if you like, in a small consultancy. And this consultancy was like a traffic and civil consultancy. And that was a real small team. That was really cool. And I did that I worked with them for about, I would say, like over the course of a year, but probably in total maybe like 2 or 3, like 2 months, 3 months in total. Yeah, awesome opportunity, awesome experience too. And that probably came from me wanting to seek out a bit of a diversified CV and show that I've got some experience under my belt when I graduate. Yeah. And it was an awesome opportunity. Like that for me was a completely different side of engineering that I just didn't see, and it helped me definitely settle the nerves a bit. I was like, okay, not all engineering is just like this. Okay, great. There's definitely another avenue stream here or opportunities here. So that was sort of a part of the process of understanding that. And then look, so back to the actual question. When it came to graduating, I could be wrong on the timeline here, but graduate programs normally get released, I think, early start of the year or even towards the end of the year for the following intake of the year. So I applied online for a bunch. And from that, I ended up working for my employer. So once I graduated, I basically locked in a graduate role with this employer, and they were awesome. Yeah, so through the online application process, I should say. Yeah,
that's how it just worked out.
That's just how it worked out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the reason I sort of give context to that is because I graduated at a time when there was, I think, 350 people that applied for this job, and they hired 5 people. So I felt very privileged to obviously be accepted. And I think what worked for me in that sense was the fact that I had that experience and that exposure, if you like, and immerse myself in a few opportunities to develop, I guess, a bit more of a package for this company and say, look, I can talk shop a little bit more than just someone who's come fresh out of uni that doesn't
just has a degree.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Key word there is the work experience, right? Like the fact that you immersed yourself and you took that initiative to do a number of different opportunities to get work, whether it being a labourer or just designing and doing different things. And I think that also serves you as a benefit, and it's probably hopefully important for our listeners to know that it just gives you once again a taste of, is this what you want to do?
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
It's also adding value, but it's also making you question yourself in the right way, in the best way possible.
Definitely.
Is this something that I actually see myself doing? Do I like this? What do I like and what do I don't like as well? So that kind of journey, I think, is very important for students to be aware of. That, you know, when you're applying for a job, you went through the graduate program, fantastic. During that time, do not just focus on the technical do not just focus on the studies, on the degree itself or the certification. Focus on the fact that you should be looking at different work experiences to complement, once again, how you can get a job one day and also understand if you want to do this.
Exactly, yeah. And talking to that as well, I think it if you are impatient and you do want to understand whether you want to do this or not, it actually helps you find the answers much quicker than waiting, if you like. Totally agree.
I like it, Josh. Moving on to our next question that we have for you is, how much is applied what you've learned in university to the real world?
Oh, geez, I'm probably the wrong person to ask this question.
Be honest, Josh. Tell me from your experience, what can you translate?
Okay, look, right. So just for context, I went into a project engineering style career. So a lot of the design elements that I studied at university are probably completely not applicable to my everyday job. What I will say, though, that I did learn at university, time management skills, how to prioritise, how to communicate well with people, like when you're doing team assignments, all that sort of stuff. And a lot of that's very applicable. Even how to just manage your life, like with working part-time and then studying full-time and all that sort of stuff. Like a lot of that's very transposable. But then going more specifically to the technical stuff, I would say that if I was to put a percentage on it, like an engineer would, I'd say, honestly, I'd probably say 5 to 10%. For context, I would say that's because I'm more of a project engineer these days. Versus if I was to go into design, I would definitely say then it would probably be in the order of 80 to 90%.
Yeah. Okay. Big difference then.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
And the thing is, though, is that at university, you learn fundamentals and you learn the principles. In reality and in the workplace, you're not actually working under first principles and fundamentals. You're working, with software. You're working with much more streamlined technology or processes that are built up off the principles you learn at university. So that's why it's applicable. But at the same time, it's still not as clearly transferable from university to the work life, I don't think.
Fair point. And no, I appreciate the honesty there, because people like to think that, whatever you study, why am I studying this? Is this applicable in the real world? Even more when you're in university, right? Yeah. It's one question in school, but then, it's one thing at school thinking about how is this applying to what I want to do in real life, but more when you're taking up a tremendous amount of debt. You're sacrificing a tremendous amount of time. You want to know what is exactly that I'm learning that is applicable one day. And I think from your perspective, as you've just mentioned, it's not because of the nature and role that you do. And I think that's important for people to be aware about. That's okay. You know what I mean?
Totally okay.
It's okay to, once again, go through that process and understand everything else that could be important, such as time management, project management, working in teams, building that understanding of being able to work in different situations during that time in university, having that kind of playground and testing period where you can make mistakes. I think that's also has tremendous value. I think it's important for, as I said, as an engineer myself, it's important for listeners out there who are interested in this career path to know that maybe, you're not going to fully apply that. It's nothing to take away from the degree, but
doesn't mean the degree is not worth it. It totally creates the opportunity to work. Is definitely the mechanism to do that. But there's no right or wrong. Like you said, it's totally okay. It's just fundamentally how the course is structured, I think. You couldn't cover everything you do in your working life in a 4-year degree. It's just not possible. It certainly sets you up for that, for sure.
Very comforting, I think. Important for our listeners to know.
So, I wish someone told me that, that's for sure.
Awesome. Next question that we have for you, asked by students, Josh. What is the salary range when starting out in your field? And how far can it grow?
Yeah, so it's a very good question, and it's a very important one. It's probably one of the biggest ones you consider when you're trying to figure out your career. So, look, I'm just talking based on my experiences. So when I started as a graduate, I was actually under a structured graduate program with my employer, and it actually went over the course of 3 years, and it incrementally increased. So when I first started, I think it was in the order of like $100,000, I think, was pretty much the first pay package.
First pay package,
yeah. And I was excited about it, but at the same time, you look at that in this day and age and you think, oh, it's probably not something that's going to be very sustainable. But you're paid for the skills that you have in the industry,
and it was the start.
Totally, and that was just my experience. Then I think incrementally over the next 3 years grew. Probably finished on about, I'd say 85 on the back of the graduate program. And then from there, and look, this is in engineering, there generally is some sort of graduate level, probably not always 3 years. This was quite unique, quite well structured, but there are sort of maybe a year you'd be a graduate, then you get promoted sort of thing. And I think from there, in civil structural engineering, it probably depends more what you're doing. So if you're a consultant and in the design space, it probably stays around that 80, probably around the 80 mark, I would say, 80 to 90, probably for the next 2 or 3 years, while you build that experience up. And then also if you go down the project route or the project management route, if you like, where you're probably doing more hours because you are either on site or you'll be exposed to more work, if you like, you might be sitting somewhere higher than that. So probably like 90 to 110, if you like, right. I would say for probably the next 2, 3 to 5 years. That's sort of my experience for that particular project engineering, I should say. But then look, from there, I think it's a very open-ended question, because the salary can from there really come down to then the opportunities you create for yourself. So for example, you could change companies and negotiate a much higher salary than that, and you've got some experience under your belt. So they sometimes sort of look at it based on your time out of university as a factor, your experience in the industry. That sort of stuff can contribute to them making a decision on, well, okay, this person's probably going to be able to really fulfill this role that we need them to do. Yeah. So they'll pay potentially more or less. And so from there, you could probably be looking at is somewhere in the order of 150. And then as you get experience, to say someone with like 10 years experience, I would say if you were in the mining industry, you'd probably be sitting somewhere around 180. If you're working from a city or in other industries, maybe somewhere around the 130, 150.
131. And this is based on what you've seen?
Correct, yeah. Exactly. Look, it's very difficult to put figures on it. I guess I'm one individual person with my experiences, but give or take. It then starts to determine like your level of seniority obviously starts to play into it too.
Absolutely. And probably coming back in terms of salary, right? Yeah. This is a very sensitive topic in terms of, what are you getting compensated for the work? But as a young professional, Josh, for the career path that you've decided to embark on in the engineering world and more as a project engineer, do you feel like with the hours that you put in, the compensation is matching? I mean, does it match basically the time and involvement that you put in terms of the work?
I hear what you're saying, yeah. Look, my experiences at the start, no. So I was a site engineer, if you like, so undergraduate. I was working on site in commercial construction, loved it. Like the experience I built was awesome. But I was probably doing 50 to 60 hour weeks and getting paid for a 38, 40 hour week on a salary.
Wow.
Yeah, and quite overworked, if you like. But with full knowledge that the experience I was getting was totally worth it and that my time would come. And I probably would stress that too. So yes and no. That was a unique experience for me. I think as a graduate, I would say that more often than not, you're probably putting in that level of extra effort to, I wouldn't say impress, but to obviously really start to develop yourself in your career, start to gain that experience. And so you're probably do have a level of I guess wanting to go a little bit more above and beyond, if you like. And so again, it probably really depends on the job you land out of university and whether the pay does outweigh that. And it can also, there's so many other factors like what's your team like, what's your boss like, does your boss value your work-life balance, do they let you go home sort of thing. A lot of my other colleagues or friends, they had different experiences to me. One of them had gone into mining. They started on 105K a year, which I was like, wow, that's amazing. But they were doing FIFO, for example. The level of effort, though, was certainly matched by salary in that case. And it does vary. But then, look, moving on where I am today, I would say that the level of effort certainly matched by the salary.
Excellent. And once again, it depends on the opportunity. It depends on so many different factors, as you just mentioned.
Yeah.
But important for students to be aware, for anyone to be aware that, freshly graduating, completing your studies, completing your higher education studies, there is no easy way to get that very high paying salary that I think sometimes comes with the association of being an engineer.
Yeah,
You know,
totally.
there's this perception even in school that, you know, even I'm guilty to that, where, you know, engineers earn a lot of money and then you finish and then you start off with a salary, let's say, for example, $66,000, which is fantastic, by the way. Your first paycheck coming in through, it's great. It's a great feeling.
You feel $1 million, but it's not $1 million. It's only 66,000.
And that's okay. And, you know, we don't want to sound privileged, but at the same time, in terms of getting to that level where you can earn significantly amount based on the fact that you have an engineering background, doesn't pay off till you really build your skills and understanding exactly what you want to do and how you position yourself. So that takes time. And I think once again comes back to the really important thing about patience. You've mentioned this multiple times, even throughout university, having a go, being patient in the process. There is no rush. Even when you finish, finding a job, take your time, really understand what you want to do, and then things will work out in that regard.
Definitely. And you nailed it there. It is so important, I think, when you start working in your working life to focus on experience and what exposure you can get and opportunities you can give yourself. And that, like you said, the money then starts to follow from that. And I was like, I thought, engineering, I'll get paid, you know, heaps. It'd be great. You know, it'd be awesome. And then I got this first offer and I thought, maybe engineering isn't all I thought was cracked up to me. I should have done some more research here. But again, and I was probably somewhat impatient, if you like. I was very motivated and was like, I want to like get to the top. Like I want to be a manager. I want to be a senior project engineer. I want to be a project manager, blah, blah, blah. And I want to get paid well for that. But you can't be that unless you actually do the work and unless you get that experience. And I came to terms with that pretty quickly. And as soon as I did, you just enjoy it. You really do sink your teeth into some good work. And important to obviously understand that you have to be sinking your teeth into experience and work that you actually do want to do or you're interested in, if you like, in that engineering space, because it can be so broad, especially in civil structural engineering. There's so many opportunities. And look, a lot the same for many of the others. It's funny you say that. I was definitely of the same mindset.
Same mindset.
Dollar bills. No, but it was not the case.
Bang, and hits you.
Yeah, exactly. No. But yeah, definitely. Experience ends up with a much better salary later down the track, I would say. Much more sustainable salary, I should say.
I like it, Josh. No, great. Appreciate that advice and honesty again from your end. Next question that we have for you, Josh, asked by students is, what keeps you motivated in the job?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say in my current role, I work very closely with a lot of people. So I'm basically a project manager now. And a lot of that comes down to managing people, managing contractors, making sure that there's a clear plan and a clear direction to where we need to be. And much of that really comes down to managing a budget, managing a schedule, making sure we're hitting our target, if you like, and what are our constraints. That largely, I find it motivating when the plan works and it comes together. And there is always stuff. It's just the nature of the job. There's always things working against you to make the plan just go as smoothly as possible. And that's the nature of it. And it's the awesome part of it, because when you solve the issues and you solve the problems that you get faced with, you get a lot of satisfaction out of that. And you kind of finish a project, or you might finish a piece of work and you look back and like, oh, wow, like I navigated a lot of that challenge. And the result is now that this functionality is working or this project's completed. And I think it's actually somewhat addicting, like to get the results. And look, my motivation, I think, has certainly peaked and troughed. And I think that also isn't largely just because of the career. Like sometimes you can work in a job that isn't motivating, and you have to probably be self-aware there and pull yourself out of it, or go look for other opportunities if you want to, really stay motivated and keep building experience. Yeah, I think the motivation peaks and troughs, and it can be for many other reasons, like life gets in the way, or you start to prioritize other things, relationships, your mental health, your mindfulness, all that sort of stuff. That's also very important to upkeep, to keep yourself motivated at work. And so I would say where I'm at now, definitely that the challenges that you get faced, but solving the problems, and working with the people too. Like that's why I went down this avenue, because I much prefer working with people than I do, I guess, sitting behind the desk doing calcs, like the other, I guess, avenue of engineering. And you build relationships with people, you get to know a lot of people, you understand how they click, and ultimately you get an opportunity to empower people to do really good work. And it's awesome. Like it's rewarding. I think it's very fulfilling when it works out that way.
Absolutely. And so great to hear that you found something within engineering that can give you all that.
Yeah.
You know, and it allows you to connect with people, work with people, be on your feet. And for anyone out there who's listening, considering engineering, there's different pathways. And the one that obviously works for you, Josh, is something that could be very interested for many people who also want a very similar experience, where they want to work with people, and having that satisfaction of solving problems on a different scale is also possible through the career of engineering.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Great to know. Last question that we have for you to wrap up this episode is, do you plan to be an engineer for the rest of your career?
We were talking about this earlier. I think
I
you know
know.
the answer.
We do.
Look, at this point in time, no, I don't think so. I think, like we were talking about, I definitely want to consider other avenues and other areas I can add value to people's lives, and also pursue something that's more fulfilling for me. I would certainly see myself staying in the career for at least the next couple of years for sure. When I say no, I guess what I'm saying is that I am currently interested in, like, I guess, moving into a more of a management style role where I work more closely with managing teams, and that can still be in engineering. And to be honest, it's probably where it's going to go for the next couple of years for me in my current position. But I definitely want to, I guess, transfer those skills to maybe other avenues. And that might look like a hybrid where I still work in that and then do other stuff on the side that I find fulfilling. But if I look at myself where I currently sit, I don't see myself doing it for the rest of my life. No, I just want to call out that that's totally okay. I'll use my old man as an example. He was a biomedical scientist. He grew up in Switzerland. Did a lot of awesome work in his field. He moved to Australia, basically worked in that, didn't find it very rewarding here in Australia. He's probably not got the same level of support and research support. So he became a prison officer, and he's done that for the last 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And,
Unreal.
loves it.
Yeah.
And it's completely left the field. It's so different. And I just call that as a perfect example that it's totally okay if you pick a career, you do it for 10 years, 5 years, 30 years, and then want to change. Definitely okay.
I'm so glad we're destroying this way of thinking of you do one degree, you do one career, and that's the rest of your life. And it's very common for many people to think like that, should I be studying this because I'm going to be doing this forever? No.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. That's the question there. And I once again, I like your honesty here that, you don't want to be an engineer for the rest of your life or for the rest of your career, but you will still utilize the backbone of what you've learned as an engineer, but you can still do anything else. Just like your old man. Like, he must have had a very technical aspect of his job, but he could definitely take skills and do something completely on the other spectrum, and he's loved it.
Yeah. And I think it talks to what we were talking about before with experience, building that experience in the field first over chasing the money, because then you're developing skills that are so much more transferable. And even when you're at uni and you're trying to get some work experience, it's the same principle. You're developing communication skills, you're understanding how to work with other people, what makes them click, and how to sort of deal with difficult situations, and then that becomes very transferable to your first job when you're out of uni and all that sort of stuff. Keep pursuing it.
And that's okay. Really great to know. And I really like that response there, Josh. And that wraps up all our questions, mate. This has been a lot of fun. It's really been great.
Really good.
It's been
really
great to get
this. I really hope we've added some value for someone who's thinking about engineering at the moment.
I definitely think so. And it just once again talks some of the traditional perceptions with engineering. We've covered a range of different topics. And it definitely provides more insight for students who now know that it's more than just engineering. There's so many different fields to it as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, for our listeners who have more questions for Josh that did not feature on our list today and would like to connect with him, just visit our website, careerview.com.au. This is where you'll find Josh's profile, and you can send him more questions, which I'm sure he'll be happy to answer.
Absolutely.
With every episode, please don't forget to submit questions that you want to know, especially to young professionals who've been there and they've done that and they can share their story. Josh, mate, can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this podcast because I'm an engineer, and it's great to hear your insights.
Nice.
There's very similarities. There's a lot of similarities there. But one thing I want to ask you before we let you go is, if you had to look back and if you had to take yourself back all the way to high school and do the whole journey again, would you do anything differently?
No, I would not. I would say, because even though I sit here now and I've just told you that maybe I'm not going to be an engineer for the rest of my life, I would say that the experiences I've had, the people I've met, the skills I've built as a result of pursuing and sticking it out has been so instrumental to my perspective on life now, my experience now, the salary I'm on now, the work I do now. And without it, I certainly wouldn't have opened up the doors and opportunities that I've created for myself. So I wouldn't know. And it sounds cliche, like I wouldn't change a thing, but no. If I did look back at the time though, I would probably have given myself more time to really consider what it was that I wanted to pursue, or maybe gone about it a little bit different in the sense of, I guess exposing myself to other avenues other than just engineering. But yeah, totally okay that I didn't. Like, it's just my story, it's my journey, and everyone who's listening is about to embark on their own. And yeah, I'll just stress the point that don't rush into anything, but also don't not do anything because you're scared to make a decision, for sure. But you've got time, and there is certainly plenty of time to figure it out, and experience definitely answers a lot of questions. And so, yeah.
Fantastic, Josh, mate. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for being here.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me. It's been great.